Hello and welcome to another episode of Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. I'm your host, Stephanie McPhail. My amazing co-host, Steve Vaccaro, is not going to be able to join us today. He's got some really important meeting for the network, he's always doing really great things. So I'm kind of excited to hear what that important meeting was that he was called away for at the last minute. But the show must go on. So I am excited to introduce Maggie Ortiz, who's going to share. And, I love that our show is able to talk about all sorts of different things related to toxic relationships. And it's not always just about romantic relationships. So a little bit different than what we've talked about before, but definitely buckle in. We're going to be hanging out for the next 20 minutes or so. Maggie, why don't you come on and hang out with us?
I love it. I love what you're doing. I appreciate being invited into this space.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Now, you and I spoke a few weeks ago, and I just remember, like, when we were talking about it, I just, your excitement and the tenacity and all of those good, positive things that you just exude in what it is that you do. So you are a nurse. And again, this is very different than we've talked about before. You're a nurse, but you've become an advocate along your nursing profession. What got you to go in that direction?
Just saying injustices, shocker, same reason that led you to the space is that, when I'm a doer, I'm just one of those people who's cut from a different cloth. I was seeing stuff after practicing for about 15 years that were affecting nurses when they were under investigation by a regulatory board and how it was crippling them. And also I became a patient advocate as well. So I do different types of advocacy that all tie to relationships, the nurse relationship in an environment or the nurse-patient relationship. So there's no shortage of relationships in the nursing world for sure.
Yeah. And I have a bunch of friends in the medical field, and I've been hearing now since before COVID, and then COVID just kind of like made so much more come out of the issues that are going on in the field. And nurses that I know that I work with that are leaving in droves because they're not getting the support that they need to really be able to do justice to their patients. Is that something that you have been seeing a lot?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the epitome of nursing. Yes, every nurses leave the profession 30% the first year, 60% the second year. And I don't mean like leave a job. I mean like walk away from their degrees and never nurse again. I mean, think about that. I mean, just think about that if you're a parent and you just dropped $30,000 on your child's education and they will never nurse again because they are so broken. And let's just be real clear. They are broken. Every other nurse is assaulted. That's 2 an hour. There's no shortage of abuses that are being extenuated in our ways. And yes, the pandemic really did push us to a place that we had never seen before. I've been practicing currently now for 24 years. I'm now away from the bedside because I just can't do it any longer. So that's why I advocate for, my profession.
And for anyone who doesn't understand, or doesn't know anyone that's been in the nursing field or medical field at all is, I have friends of mine that were in the nursing program, and like the stats for people that are like in depressions and like suicidal to just get through the program. That's how tough it is to get through. And then even after that, people are still leaving. So I want people to understand like how difficult it is to get in. And then once you're in, people are still deciding to leave. That should say something to anyone who's listening.
And the Guinness World Book says that the Bachelor of Nursing is the hardest degree. Now, I'm not making this up. And anyone who is a nurse just totally identified, Stephanie, with what you just said, because we do know that the sacrifices that my people make to get there and then to walk away from that, it is very profound. And I think it is time for the public to tune in because everyone, unfortunately, at some time in your life will be a patient.
And nurses aren't leaving because they're like sad when patients pass away. Not that they're not feeling that and whatever. They're not getting supported to do their job. And I know that, and there was all this back and forth during COVID of people like not believing that COVID was real and people not feeling supported. And that definitely just kind of like escalated the already high levels of stress that people were feeling. But, I think the big thing is that we need to understand that hospitals are not doing what they need to support the medical professionals. They're not there to do what is needed to have them do their job. So again, it's not like they're upset for other reasons. They're not getting what they need to do their jobs. And we were talking about it, and I've seen a few, I think one or two more since we've spoken, but there are nurses who have, without meaning to, given the wrong medication because they did not get the proper meds sent up to them. They were not properly given information about the meds, whatever it was, but they gave medications that ended up killing or severely injuring some of their patients. This is something that we're hearing. And I hate to say, if it keeps going down this trend, it almost feels like it's going to get worse.
I agree. We are seeing in the media, we all are, where cases are crossing over not only from administrative law. So when you hold a license, you're a nurse, you're a doctor, you're a teacher, you fall under administrative law, crossing over to criminal law where reckless homicide, showing up to your job, and again, not being given the resources, and or where an organization doesn't even comply with what the recommendations are per governing agencies. They're violating those. And so when a nurse, let's just say, goes to the medication dispensing machine and goes to look up a paralytic, and the organization is not even complying with what the standards should be in that, to search that drug, the nurse is able to find it with a 2-letter search instead of a 3 or 4-letter search, which is the governing body's recommendation. That drug is accessed and then given because in that environment, let's just say down in radiology, there is no scanner. So the nurse was trying to comply, but then those resources within the organization were not there for the nurse. And then again, that is extenuating on down into another environment. Yet that nurse is the only one who's standing there in criminal court being held liable. And now in some states that can be a mandatory, let's just say 15 years, because it falls to a class B and not C. And that nurse was just showing up to her job.
Yeah. And I mean, and obviously nurses did not go through all that work to do harm. They're there to help. I mean, some of the most empathetic, kind-hearted people I know are in the nursing profession, which is why they got into it. Now, you went from nursing, and now, of course, you're now advocating. What was the big push for you that you were like, I can't watch this anymore? Like, what made you say, I have to be the one to step up and do something about this?
Sure. So I had been practicing for about 15 years and then crossed over to become an investigator for a board of nursing, where I was feeling like we are not extending nurses what I feel is our constitutional right of due process. So I left that agency, started studying up on administrative law, and started helping nurses and their legal teams really seeing the ramifications of a governing body like a board of nursing being involved in a nurse's life, and it almost crippling a nurse, depending on what it was, and then having nowhere to turn. So if I'm being retaliated against, and that's what a judge said verbatim to a nurse, asking the nurse why she was standing here in this, trial due to retaliation, and then have no recourse in pretty much any state. That was, mind-boggling to me. So back to your question, that's what changed me. That's what was that. I've been a nurse for 15 years, and I was like, wait, what? No one knows this. Everyone assumes that our governing body that gives us the privilege to practice is there to protect us. And that is so far from the truth. The mission of every board of nursing or governing body is to protect the public and not the nurse.
And you'd think they should be protecting both. Like, it protects the patients if you're protecting the nurse to make sure they're doing their job properly. I mean, it seems to be so obvious, but that's not actually what's happening. So you've decided to take it a step further now, and now, and actually I have another question that I'll ask after that, but you took it a step further and you're like, not only am I unhappy, but I am going to get a law degree, so that I can better help nurses. Now, very different than what you originally went to school for with nursing. Now here you are looking to become a lawyer so that you can help more nurses. How's that whole journey going?
Sure. So I am studying for the LSAT. So I'll be, entering law school 2025. So crossing over from helping nurses and their legal teams as a consultant and or an expert nurse as a legal nurse, just as a caveat, I'm not a lawyer currently and I never get legal advice, just to, further, clarify that. But so helping nurses and their legal teams, I'll be able to extenuate that. And now I'll be the one, the nurses will hire because I'll be the RN, I'll have the JD behind my name. So the Juris Doctor, which is a law degree. And I already know what I'm going to do. It's what I'm already doing right now. I'll just be the one that they're calling and hiring to represent them in my own state. And then hopefully extenuating that on to make some real change across the nation so that nurses are extended due process when they are under investigation.
So I think I want to make sure that I'm clear on this. Is there a national board to protect or that nurses have to answer to, or is that state by state or county by county?
Great question. So there is a national council for state boards of nursing, which gives guidance to each state. So it would kind of be like stuff that would be federal and state. Each state adopts laws and rules and regulations in their state. For example, my state does have a traditional board of nursing. A state, I believe, like Michigan, falls under HHS or DHS, so Health and Human Services, the Department of Health and Human Services. So all of them are set up differently, but take guidance from the National Council from State Boards of Nursing, adopt rules and regulations, scope of practice, standards of practice, what a nurse can do, what an RN versus an LPN versus a nurse practitioner, all laid out under the rules and regulations that dictate the practice. No different than would be a physician and or a teacher. All of us have rules and regulations that dictate given to the state under those governing bodies.
Now, do you see any areas in those regulations that might need some tweaks?
Yes, I do. And unfortunately, sunset, and I'm not going to sit here and say I know all the ins and outs about what sunset law is, but sunset law basically in every state is how like the rules and regulations are adopted for each discipline or each, they come together every like decade, which is way too far away. Say that they want to adopt something new that's looked at under sunset with the public health committee within your state, adopted, at the time that sunset, comes up. So yes, so back to your question, there are things within that I think that need to be changed. And then I do think that there needs to be some standards. Like, why isn't there a board of nursing in every state? Why is it under HHS here and DHS here? Why doesn't all boards of nursing have just culture adopted into the language of it, like the North Carolina Board of Nursing? I do think that there needs to be some consistencies. We have what we call compact license. So there are 33 states, I believe, to date that say if you live in this state and you have a license here, you can go to these other 32 states to practice. So they're just, if that's the case, then why are we not under all some kind of the same standards in every state? Texas does have more language where it does detail out specifically what like maybe an LPN versus an RN can do. And I know I'm getting to some of the woods, but there does need to be some consistency because nurses will come to me and say, I came from Texas and it was spelled out. And now I went to Alabama and it's so vague. So I don't understand. Is this not within my scope of practice? So yes, that will be something that I will be working on.
This sounds like you have your work cut out for you. So like, how do you even start that? Like you've got to get the right connections. How do you get yourself in there to start making these big changes?
Well, that's like, I got to have a team. I have been in this space for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and I have connected with a bunch of nurses. I've gone to social media, picked up a whole bunch of followers I didn't even know existed and growing. So it's not only my concern, it's other nurses' concerns. More often than not, there are nurses that have been reported, have been disciplined. So unlike myself, where, I don't have a dog in this fight outside of what I feel I'm called to, some of these other nurses are driven differently because they have been disciplined, and oftentimes what they feel to be unjustly so, creating like a coalition or something, when I get, out into the big world, I have some time to develop that out, but something for sure I'm thinking about because, as you alluded to, it's my bandwidth is only so far.
Yeah. Yeah. This is Kicking Healthy Relationships to the Curb. I'm your host, Stephanie McPhail, and we are speaking with Maggie Ortiz, talking about some of the issues that are concerning nurses right now in this country. And I'm wondering, what if there was a hospital listening right now, what would you tell them, some things that maybe they could do to be better supporters of nurses?
Listen to the nurses. We are the end users of everything. We're the innovators, they're creators. I guarantee you there are nurses within your organization who have already solved the problems. And oftentimes they're leaving your unit, they're leaving your buildings for a reason. Sit down with them, talk to them, remove your ego. It's not about you. Ask them, if there was a magic wand and I could give you everything you need, what would it be? More often than not, I can already tell you what its number one's going to be: safe staffing. Nurses want to know that they can show up to their job and just provide the care that the patients deserve to get. And when they're told, like in the ICU, that they're going to need to take on a third patient, that's causing them moral distress and putting them in a place where they can be reported to a board of nursing, because knowingly and willingly taking on an unsafe assignment is the definition of medical malpractice. That's civil litigation. And then 21711 S&T, just in my own state, says that me accepting that assignment and the person making me that assignment under the board of nursing could end us there. So you have to support the staffing issues, whatever those are. And that does involve leadership. You need to making sure that if the schedule is put out 30 days in advance and there's a shortage of 3 nurses on a day, that what are you doing, leadership? We cannot wait until the day of. We have to make sure that we're working within the organization and solving those problems. Supporting nurses coming into the profession, especially the post-COVID nurses who did not get any clinicals. Every governor across the United States had to overturn in-person clinicals. These nurses are feeling like they are not confident in their skills and may need a residency program. Every organization should be providing at least a year internship for these nurses, where they have another nurse that can champion them. Someone who's been a nurse for a decade, ideally, not someone who's new to the profession. It has to be a seasoned nurse. And then you're providing that preceptor or that seasoned nurse with some incentive. You're not, $1 or $2, you're giving them a preceptor class, and then also realizing that you're taking feedback from their preceptor as well. Sometimes you have to move that person along because they may not always fit with that preceptor, and there's nothing wrong with that. And then moving them along to someone that they connect with.
Yeah, and that's a great idea too. Not everyone's going to get along, and that doesn't necessarily mean the person's not doing their job. Sometimes it's just not a good fit. I'm thinking about, well, for one, the amount of head nurses, is that what they're called, that are only a few years in. They're only like 2 or 3 years ahead of some of the other people on the floor, and they're the ones in charge of the entire floor, all the staffing, all of that. That's setting up everyone for disaster, because they don't have that knowledge and that history under their belt to really make those kinds of big decisions.
And you're another great point that I think the hospital should consider as well. No one should be a charge nurse unless they've been a nurse for at least 5 years. Because just like you said, if I've been in the career for 20 years and I'm coming to you and I know my patient's not doing well and I'm coming to you to troubleshoot this, what do you bring to the table? And I'm not being ugly, but it's just time, versus you coming to me being for a couple years and I'm like, okay, let's go look at the patient. You know what I mean? I'm walking in the room and I already can tell you 12 things. That's what that nurse needs from me. I don't need to hook up to monitors. I already know, let's call rapid. Let's get some other people in here. I can just lay my eyes on that patient and I already know sick or not sick. Do we need to move this patient or not? Because that's what I bring to the table. You know what got me there? Time standing in the facility, time in the profession. So organizations recognizing my people, the seasoned nurses, valuing them and not seeing us as when we're precepting, we can give them 2 more patients. No, you cannot. You cannot do that. I am precepting a new nurse for a reason. At least value them. Show them that at least, you're bringing them on and you value them so much that you coupled them up with a seasoned nurse who values their education so intensely that you're not going to give them, you're not going to see me and be able to just split me, right? So no, that's not appropriate.
And anyone who hasn't yet experienced someone needing nursing care, needing extra assistance in a hospital setting. I mean, my husband was sick when we first moved to Texas in 2020. So he didn't have COVID, but it was in the COVID era. And, he got sick and he ended up in the ICU. And I will tell you that it was such a relief to have the nurses that were smart as a whip and on top of their shit, like, excuse me, but it was like they knew, like, this is something to call the doctor about. This is someone to let the doctor, this is what's going on, looking at everything, making sure. And she was between, my husband and then another patient going back and forth. And I was amazed at her ability to do that because of the intensity of the level that she had to be of support. And all I was thinking was, how could she do any more? Like, already she was a superwoman from doing what she was doing. Like, how could she do any more than that? And people don't understand you need that level, especially in a life or death situation where like someone has to be those eyes to see when there's something going on.
And I can only take care of two people. Now you give me that third person and now one of them has a bad outcome. I'm not going to put that down. The moral distress. And now let me just add as well, that now you're in the NICU. So now you're talking about a neonate. Now let's talk about the pediatric intensive care unit. The moral distress that nurse will carry, she will never, ever, ever put down. Because what plays in our mind all day, every day? Did I do enough? Did I miss something? And who set me up for that? My organization.
Yeah.
Not me. And all I wanted to do was show up to work. And what I'll keep playing in my mind as well? That mother screaming and yelling because, their child didn't make it. And then, once she walked away and left the unit, who put that little person in the body bag? I did. It was me.
Yeah. And those are the kinds of stories that aren't told.
Correct.
People don't really understand that, again, people go into this with very good hearts, with very good intentions. And so anyone who's not doing their job, I mean, there's going to be bad apples. I mean, let's be real. But I would say most of the profession is really there because they are kind-hearted, wonderful people and do their utmost to be of service and to help their clients. And I would say, again, having that experience, like the bedside manner, someone to just know how to talk to you, to have the 5 minutes, I'll say, to just be able to talk to you when everything is new, like you're having this health issue, you're already scared. The doctor just comes in and is like 3 cc's of this, that, the other thing. And you're like, I don't know what any of that means. And then the nurse can come in and be like, how are you doing? Oh, you want me to explain to you? Let me tell you what's going on. And, say it in regular wording that any of us can understand. It always feels better to have someone talk to you like a human and not like another medical abnormality or a medical issue. It's nice to have that connection with someone who can like make you feel at ease. That is just a beautiful gift to be able to have.
Well, I'm glad you had a great experience because all that you just said is the epitome of a good nurse. Just like you said, the doctor unfortunately has, could be several hundred people they're seeing, procedures. They come in, they're 15 minutes, tell you XYZ, walk out, and you're just like, I have no idea what happened. My gift to you is that, yes, I will be here for 12 hours and we will slowly but incrementally digest and unpack that. And I'll give you tangible things that you may look up on your phone or, in layman's words so that you can better understand.
Yeah. So we've got about 4 minutes left. What would be something that you'd like to share with the audience that maybe they haven't thought about before, maybe give a different perspective of the situation that we're in right now with nursing?
I think we touched on some really good things, and you alluded to is that we are highly intelligent, primarily women. Yes, there are many men in our career, but primarily women, but highly educated. And it's some of this propaganda that they have all over the media about the pay is just not real. Please stop listening to that. And if there are any bills or anything out there that helps support nurses, please, 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 vote, get that out there. And we need stuff to help support us with staffing, with violence against us, with pay. So everyone's going to be a patient. Unfortunately, when you came into this world, a nurse touched you. And when you leave this world, more likely than not, a nurse will be the last person that touches you.
What could be something that maybe like the average layperson could do to be of more support?
Well, honestly, any bill, because we do, there's a lot of safe staffing bills that are out there that I just think that people don't pay attention to. Because think about this, if I'm just like we alluded to, if your husband was in the ICU and he was that sick that he needed that level of care, can you imagine had I taken on another patient? Well, what if there's nothing to protect me? In this state, there is nothing. So who am I going to tell? They're going to terminate me, or they're going to retaliate against me. You know what protects me? The state safe staffing ratios. So when there are bills out there, and they are in every state, please, please reach out to your own representative, and we need to have those in place. They have to be mandated. I know that seems crazy, but it pulls me away from providing the care that I need. And it could be just like you said, I miss several of your low blood pressures because I'm in another room, because I can only be in one place at one time. And then now you're not here any longer because you're already in the ICU.
So, and I'm so excited that you were able to come and share this. Again, really different than what we've talked about before. But, this really is all about shining a light in the areas that we might not normally talk about. And I think this was a great example of exactly that. What are some ways that people can find you and maybe follow some of the great work that you're doing?
Sure. So Advocates for Nurses, FOR, or number 4. All my handles are the same. I don't get crazy. I'm on every social media platform out there, and love nurses, support nurses. We will take all the help that we can get out there. And there are nurses running for office as well. So love that. Always love to see nurses running for office and supporting patient advocacy, because we are your last defense. More often than not, we are the ones advocating you in the back of the house. You just don't know it.
That's awesome. So how much longer till you take your LSAT?
Well, it's like, June 6th. So it's like 60 some days. So I'm like drowning in that. It's pretty stressful. I applaud anyone who's passed this test and made it through. I can't wait to be amongst the ranks.
Well, if there's anyone that is passionate, it is you. So I have a feeling where there's a will, there's a way. You're going to make it happen. So good luck on that. We'll look forward to hearing the results, because that means you're, one step further to doing all the great changes and doing more of the work that you're so passionate about doing. So thank you so much, Maggie, for coming on and hanging out with us and sharing all your great knowledge with all of our audience. And everyone else, thanks again for coming and hanging out with us on Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. We will see you next week. Bye, everybody.